Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today I am going to be doing a review of A Brightness Long Ago by Guy Gavriel Kay. Now, my Guy Gavriel Kay experience is pretty limited. I'd only previously read Tigana and I read that a couple of years back. I gave it 2 stars. I really did not enjoy it, but I did think that his prose was beautiful and that I would give him another chance at some point. I ended up going to the library for the first time in like 6 years a couple of weeks ago, and they had one Guy Gavriel Kay book, and that was A Brightness Long Ago, and I thought, you know what, let's pick it up. There's really no risk. I'm not buying it. If I don't like it, I can just return it to the library. And I just thought, let's just do it. I didn't know anything about the book at the time. I did not know what it was about, really. I didn't really read the blurb. I tend not to read blurbs in general because almost always they have a little spoiler. But I didn't know anything about the book. I hadn't heard anything about it at the time that I started reading it. I learned a lot more about it after the fact, but it was absolutely wonderful, folks. I devoured this book in less than 24 hours and I would give it 1,000,000 stars if I could. So this is an indication of how this review is going to go. I loved it. I fell in love with his writing. I fell in love with his character work. His ability to weave kind of historical context into the story is just absolutely phenomenal. And without further ado, let's just jump into the review. So let's just jump into a very brief summary of the plot. The plot is that we are following 2 military commanders in their quest to get more power by gaining a very specific city-state. That city-state has a specific advantage because it has a port, and with a port means that you can essentially control trade. We are following 3 main perspectives, and then I will come onto those perspectives later on, but we're following 3 main perspectives as they interact with these 2 characters and as they get embroiled into this kind of quest for more power. The plot is very simple. It's based on a true story, 2 incredibly powerful families in the Renaissance. I can't remember their names, but if you look it up on the internet, you can find it. So it is influenced by actual historical events, but it's just Guy Gavriel Kay's perspective on it. And with that in mind, let's jump into my review. So what did I love about it? The writing is absolutely breathtaking. It is stunning. It is probably some of the best writing. You know what? It is some of the best writing I've ever read in my entire reading career. And that is a pretty decently long reading career. And I was just mind blown. I was so taken into his writing. That's why I read this book in less than 24 hours, because I was just so absorbed into what he was saying and into how he was saying it. The prose flows beautifully. It never feels disjointed. There's never any info dumping. Everything is just balanced perfectly. The dialogue, the thematic work, the character development, like everything just works. It has a place. It's there for a purpose. And he just hits the notes perfectly. He does swap between first-person narrative and then third-person narrative, which I've not really experienced before, but I quite liked it. I think he did it very well, and I think it added to the story, because one minute you're really engrossed in the story from the perspective of one character, and the next minute you're taking a bit of a step back. You're a little bit removed from the narrative, and then that allows you to kind of think about, you know, which character you support or which perspective you perhaps favor. At first it felt a little bit odd because I've never really experienced that, or experienced it in a very limited way, but it really worked, and I think it actually added to the story in this instance. It does also go back and forth in time, which again I generally don't really like, but he just did it so well. Like, he doesn't give you signposts for when you're back in time or you're in present day, but he makes it so obvious and so clear when you are, that again, it doesn't disjoint the story. It just makes sense to the reader that you would tell the story in this way. And the thing that I really love about that as well is that we really get to see the consequences of certain actions. Then we also get the POV's reflection on that action as well. So I really liked that we were kind of getting this live view of what was happening, but then we also see the longer term effects of that decision or that choice. So I loved that. This book reads like history in action. Like, it really does read as though I was reading a history book about the Renaissance, and I was reading about the Medicis or the Sforzas or or the Strozzis, or, you know, whoever it is. Like, I felt like I was reading about one of these really powerful families in Italy. And I think, as somebody who loves the Renaissance is my favorite period in history, or one of my favorite periods of history. I studied it a lot as I was growing up, and then I still read about that specific area of history today because I love it so much happening, so much kind of vying for power. And he captures that essence perfectly. I've never really seen an author capture that kind of from a historical context perspective so well. And Kay just hit the note on the spot. And I don't really tend to read that much historical fiction anymore, but he's kind of made me want to test the waters again, because it just kind of reminded me of what really good historical fiction can read like. But then there's obviously these kind of fantastical elements thrown in as well, so it's kind of the best of both worlds. The last thing that I will mention on kind of his writing style is that there are kind of like 3 layers of POVs. We have 3 main POVs. So we have Guadagno, and then we have Adria, and then we have Yelena. I'll come on to the characters later on because I have a lot of opinions on the characters, but we're following those 3 main characters. And then we have like the secondary POVs, and then we have the POVs of just random people who are living their daily life in this world. And I really love that. The only author that I've seen do that really well is Joe Abercrombie, when he shifts POVs to just random people who are like living their lives. And he does that in this book, and I just love it. I love it because we are really seeing the impact of the day-to-day events on the average person living their life quietly and just trying to survive, basically. And it just kind of gives you this added layer, this kind of 360 view of the impact of what is really happening in that present time. And I just thought it was so good. It was so good. It's the sort of book that you could very easily see made into a limited TV series, because it's so well developed that I don't think you would need to take that many liberties with it. I mean, if anybody wants me to direct it, I'll totally do it. I'll take one for the team and I'll do it. Give me a good budget though. All right, characters. Characters are wonderful. The 3 main characters that we follow, they're very distinct. We follow Guadagno Cerra. He is the kind of main POV that we follow. His father is a tradesman, and he is at the start of the book thinking about following his father in trade. They own a bookstore and they make books, and they obviously sell those books. And he is thinking about taking that same path, but then he has a run-in with one of the 2 military leaders, and that essentially changes his life course. The thing I really love about Guadagno is that he's very introspective. He reminds me a lot of myself, and I identify with him a lot. I identify with him in one of the POV a lot, and he's very thoughtful. He has this really interesting inner battle regarding religion, and not wanting to reveal that inner battle with religion because, you know, it's taboo. And he's just clearly very intelligent, but he's not obviously intelligent, if that makes sense. You know, he's not necessarily going to be the person banging the drum at the 9th hour, but he's going to be there giving his opinion, and it's an opinion that you probably want to follow because he's clearly very bright and very in tune with other people and how they feel. I love emotionally intelligent characters, and he is definitely one of them. The other POV that I really loved was Adria. We follow Adria Ripley, and she is the daughter of a very powerful leader in this world, and she wants to do things her own way. She doesn't want to get wed off. She doesn't want to just live a normal life that a woman lives, or a wealthy woman lives, I should say, which is that they either get married to a rich man or a powerful man, or a rich and powerful man, and they live their life in that way. And, you know, it's all about producing heirs, or they dedicate their lives to God and they essentially just, you know, pray and reflect and really focus on religion and growing their spirituality. She doesn't want to do either one of those things. She is feisty, she's a fighter, she's an incredibly talented horse rider. She just wants to do things her own way, and I definitely identify with her. She's very independent, free thinking, and I really liked the way that a lot of the male characters perceived her. You know, they obviously think of her as this kind of very attractive, clearly very bright individual, but there's a lot of respect for her as well, and I really loved that. And I really loved her relationship with Guadagno as well. I think their interactions were some of my favourite, because I think they both revealed to each other parts of themselves that they maybe didn't even reveal to themselves. And I always love that, because I think those are the types of relationships that we should all strive for, right? Is those relationships that can add to our lives, and I think they both add to each other really well. The third POV that we follow, main POV that we follow, is Yelena. She, I would say, is probably the weakest POV. She's a healer, and she just kind of accidentally gets caught up in a bunch of stuff, and it was still extremely well executed. I just didn't really connect with her as much as I did with the other two. I think she provides maybe a slightly more removed perspective on the events that are happening, because she's just kind of there, and she didn't really, you know, she doesn't really opt into anything. It just kind of happens to her. Whereas I think the other two, they make decisions for themselves, and then those decisions lead to certain paths, and, you know, it kind of spirals. But she's just there, and shit just happens, and she kind of takes it on the chin, and I like her for that reason. I also really liked Antanami, I don't know if I'm saying his name right, Antanami Sadi. Now, Antanami Sadi is a really great character. He's your kind of typical spoiled brat. He's the son of a very powerful ruler, and he's the second son, I think it is, and his older brother is the heir, so he's just kind of the spare part, and he just drinks, he spends money, he's perceived as not being that bright, but the thing I really like about Sadi is that there's a lot of depth to him, there's a lot of layers. He's kind of like Jezzel, a little bit from the First Law. You know, you get that perception of him being a little bit of a waste of space, because what does he really add to the world? But then later on, he really develops into this thoughtful individual. And his relationship with Yelena, their interactions were really telling. And I think similar to Adria and Guadagno, I said that they make each other better. I think those two made each other better as well. And I really loved their interactions. I loved his ending. I'm not going to say anything beyond that, but I really liked the way that his arc kind of resolved, and I kind of wish we had a book just following him, because I think he's hilarious as well. The last thing I'm going to mention on characters is that I mentioned that we are really following two main individuals in their quest for more power. So the first person is Montecola de Remigio. I'm definitely saying his name wrong, but then we also follow Folco Cino de Corsi. Now, the names are wonderful. Like, they're so Italian and like Renaissance-esque. It really kind of gets you into the mood. But I really liked their dynamic. I really liked the fact that a lot of their relationship is just based on a lie. And we see the way that they perceive each other. And it's just fascinating how it's very obvious that they kind of fear each other, and they're both each other's biggest worst enemy, but in reality they're both just two men who care about their family and who want to just get more power. And I think when you kind of reduce it down to that, they're essentially the same person, but just on different sides of the war, I guess. And I should say conflict, actually. They're just on different sides of the conflict, and I really like seeing that play out. I personally really like De Courcy more, because I really like really intelligent characters. I think Montecola is bright, but he's more of a military leader. He's very physically fit. They describe him as being really handsome, and, you know, everybody kind of, you know, fancies him. But De Courcy, you know, he's described as being quite ugly. He's not very good looking, but he's known for his mind and he's known for his brain. And I love those types of characters. Those are my favorites. Their interactions were also some of my favorite. As you can tell, there's a lot of interactions that I really liked. I think the dialogue was so good as well. Like, the dialogue was very revealing. It really adds to the multi-layeredness of this story, and it's just wonderful. It's just wonderful. In terms of themes, there's a lot of thematic work at play. I mentioned one about, you know, faith and struggle with faith, and faith versus magic. Like, can you have both, or are they at odds with each other? I really like the classic kind of question of doing what is right versus doing what is just. They're not often the same thing, and I think we get that question quite a lot throughout the duration of the story. There's a much broader question of why we do what we do. Is it because of legacy? Is it because we want power? Is it because we want to one-up another person? Like, why do we ultimately do what we do? What are we motivated by? Is it money? Is it by physical objects? Or is it about something grander than that? And if it is, what is it? Is it about legacy, or is it about something else? It's something that I've been grappling a lot with myself recently, because as I think about what I want to be working on next, the company that I want to build, I think it's really important to know why you're doing it. And I've been thinking and reflecting on that, and so it was quite nice to kind of see that reflected in this story as well. And then the last thing that I will mention thematic wise is the kind of focus on the arts and how it contributes to the development of society and how it really adds to society. I think that's a fairly common theme in Kay's books from what I understand, and I think he captures that really beautifully in this story. You know, the art of making things and creating things and maintaining things, it's just really kind of subtly referenced, but I think it's a very important message to take from this book, because I think Kay himself is personally very invested in the preservation of the arts, and you can definitely see that reflected in the story. The last thing that I will mention is the setting. We're in this kind of very Renaissance Italy-esque setting, and I think he captured it perfectly, to be honest. I've read a lot about Renaissance Italy, and I think he's captured it the best in fiction. We are in a couple of different locations. The two main ones that I'm going to mention are Battiara, which I think the most similar city I can think of is probably Rome. It's kind of the center of the world, and kind of everything is happening there. There's a lot of trade, lots of arts, lots of, you know, commerce. There's, you know, everything is kind of happening there, and that's kind of why it's so important. And then we have Sorressa, which actually kind of reminds me more of the south of Italy. It's on the coast, and there's lots of like really kind of cobbled streets, and it kind of feels very distinct. It reminds me of when I went to the south of Italy a couple of years back. A lot of the descriptions like literally took me back to being there. So I don't know if that's actually the case, but at least from my sense, that's kind of what it felt like. And then there is another city called Ferrante, which I'm assuming is inspired by Florence, especially given the fact that we are following two very wealthy families. It reminds me of the Medicis and some of the other families that were in the neighboring kind of city states like Milan, like the Sforzas, and you have a couple of the other ones, but we won't go into that because I'll just get carried away. But the point is that each kind of city felt very distinct. I kind of wish we'd just seen more of the world, but I don't think you could, to be honest, given the size of the book. But he does such a good job of just making each place feel like a place that you would know if you've been to Italy before. I think that just makes it feel really special, and I really loved it. I think the only downside is, and I did not have issues with this, as I said earlier, I think the only downsides are probably the time jumps. Some people might find it a little bit disconcerting because it does happen quite suddenly, but I think give yourself a bit of time to get used to it, and then I think you'll get used to it and you'll be absolutely fine. But I loved it. I think it really added to the way that the story was told and the way that the story developed and the characters developed. So I am here for it. I loved it, and I think just give it a chance at least and see if you can get on with it. Before I go on to a few quotes, I rated this book 1,000,000 stars. I want to say it was my favourite book of the year, but I've read so many good books this year that I don't know if I can say that with confidence, but it's up there as one of my favourites. I'm picking up more Guy Gavriel Kay now that I've read that book, and I just fell in love with it because I keep thinking about it, and I just want everybody to read it because I just think it's wonderful. It's such a beautiful story, and I just, yeah, I'm a little bit kind of reflective even now about it because I just loved it so much. And it's the sort of book that I'd love to do a reread of at some point, so we'll see when that happens. In terms of quotes, I have 5 because it's a very quotable book, and I like giving you guys a bit of a flavour of what to expect, and some of you have told me that as well, so let's just get to them. So the first quote is, "We like to believe or pretend we know what we're doing in our lives. It can be a lie. Winds blow, waves carry us, rain drenches a man caught in the open at night. Lightning shatters the sky and sometimes his heart. Thunder crashes into him, bringing the awareness he will die. We stand up as best as we can under that. We move forward as best as we can, hoping for light, kindness, mercy for ourselves and those we love." Second quote. "It was interesting. I suppose it still is how vicious men can take power and be accepted, supported by those they govern, if they bring with them a measure of peace, if granaries are full and citizens fed." Third one. "Perhaps in the darkest of times, all we can do is refuse to be a part of the darkness." Fourth. "She'd been afraid, preparing herself, after the summons came to the farmhouse. But fear was something you mastered, not a thing that defined you. Folko told all of them that. You didn't deny it, you felt it, you ruled." Last one. I think that when we're young, we often have the sense that what we do when faced with a choice will define our lives forever. This can be untrue, sometimes amusingly so, but not always. And there we go. It's a very long review. I didn't realize it was this long, but I think it's partly because I'm just sat on this like really comfortable sofa right now. I'm in Edinburgh at the moment in Scotland. I'm staying at my brother's place and his sofas are really comfortable, and I'm kind of just sat in this corner filming a few videos today. And I feel like it maybe makes me a bit more kind of reflective on what I'm saying because I'm just like super chilled. So it's quite nice. And I'm also testing out a new mic. My hair is hiding it. That wasn't intentional. So I hope the audio is better. But yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know if you've read this book because I love this book. And I think like Jake is one of the only few people that has read it because he's a big Guy Gavriel Kay fan, and you should check out his channel if you want to learn more about Kay and kind of see suggestions on where to start with his books. But wonderful book, million stars. Go read it, go buy it, go consume it, and then come and tell me when you read it and we'll chat about it. I'll see you in the next video, folks. Stay safe, take care, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.